Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Uday Bhaskar. The focus this week is on India-Russia military ties, and the backdrop is provided by the just concluded bilateral summit-level meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin at Goa in the run-up to the BRICS summit. In a significant development, India and Russia inked an intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, worth almost US $11 billion for certain high-value military inventory items. These include advanced surface-to-air missile systems, stealth frigates of the Talwar class, and the Kamov light helicopters. However, it must be added that these are agreements at this stage, and more detailed negotiations will take place before the deals are finally concluded. Yet, they represent a substantive infusion of content into the bilateral with Russia, and some features are potentially significant. For instance, the Make in India emphasis. While India's relationship with the former Soviet Union and later Russia has always been deemed quote-unquote special for a variety of reasons, the military component has enabled India to acquire a credible defense capability, and the emphatic victory in the 1971 war is testimony to this professionalism acquired by the Indian Forge. Over the last decade, there has been a diversification of the military supplier basket by India, and consequently, Russia's status as the sole or principal supplier has not been what it was in the past. What is the current contour of the India-Russia military relationship? To discuss this, we have an eminent panel. Ambassador Ajai Malhotra, till recently the Indian ambassador in Moscow, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, an astute Moscow watcher, and Vice Admiral Satish Soni, till recently Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Eastern Naval Command in Vizag. Ambassador Malhotra, if I could start with you, how would you characterize the India-Russia relationship over the last decade? And what is the significance of the IGA signed in Goa, which is almost $11 billion worth?
Well, let me start by saying that good relations with Russia are a key pillar of India's foreign policy. There are many sectors in which we have very close and trust-based relations with Russia, and defense is one of them. They extend to nuclear power, energy security, oil and gas, and space, etc. These are all sensitive sectors, as you would appreciate. Our relations with Russia in the defense field are also long-standing. In one sense, we started in a small way, maybe from the mid-1950s, but it really grew post-62 and really thereafter.
The first MiG comes in 1962, if I remember right.
Well, we bought our first Me helicopters, Me-4s, in 1958. So I'm looking at that as a more precise date. But if you see how the relationship has progressed since then, whether it's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and what we are doing in cooperation with Russia, as it is said, close to 60 to 70% of our requirements are now met by Russia, and that is not going to change in the foreseeable future. Let me add to the point you made. We have traditionally also been buying from other sources. We've had, Jaguars, we've had from the British French, we have had French Mirage, we have had Bofors from Sweden, we have had Pilatus trainers from Switzerland. And so any number of, from Israel, we bought missiles, etc. So any number of other things have gone along side by side, along with this close relationship with Russia. Coming to the point you made about the IGA. There are several. We signed, in fact, 2 IGAs and one MOU and some other agreements which have a bearing on the defense relationship. First of all, the KA-226T. The
Kamov light helicopter.
The Kamov light helicopters to buy 60 odd from Russia and make 140 up here. And let me add, this is a traditional pattern that has been there. If you look at HAL also, and if you look at, for example, our T-90s, we bought some, then we would assemble them here or make them in India. Look at Su-30 MKIs, you look at the MiGs before that, buy some and assemble them or make them up here. So this is a continuation of that tradition. But it is important that we are putting the stress that we will not only buy, but we will make up here because of the private sector that is coming in. So KA-2 2060 and the other two, the S-400 Triumph, that's a very important missile system. It has recently proved itself, I think, in Syria, when they deployed it at Khmeimim and at Tartus at the naval facility. Straight away, everyone stepped back because that is a lethal weapon system for any incoming
surface to
aircraft. Yeah. So, and thirdly,
are the frigates.
The four frigates. Now, these also we have bought in the past. We have bought 6 of them. I was privileged to be there when we got Teg, Tarkash and Trikand on board under the 1135.6. These are really excellent frigates.
I'll bounce this to Satish, but before that, Mohan, if I can get you in, we often say that up to 70% of India's military inventory is of Soviet/Russian origin. Ajai says that the first Mi-8 came in 1958.
Mi-4.
But the Mi-4, I beg your pardon. But what is the reason? Why have we not been able to really enhance the make in India with this long-standing relationship with Moscow?
First of all, I think that's wrong to say that Russia supplies 70% of our equipment. And incidentally, the first military transfer from Russia came in 56 when Khrushchev and Bulganin gave our Prime Minister 2 IL transport aircraft flying around.
These are the first illusions.
First illusions, which VIP fleet.
Mid-1950s, that's correct.
So, but what Ambassador Malhotra said is very important. All our transfers from Russia involved assembly here, and which means transference of technology. So HAL has the capacity to build de novo, design de novo because of the Russian involvement with HAL. And I think it's been a good relationship with them, except that, some of our quality standards in HAL have fallen behind, and, the Russians get blamed for it. But Syria has shown that number of missions a plane can launch Su-34, which is the equivalent of the Su-30 strike version, is far superior to what we are doing. So obviously there are some issues there. And the cost of a mission is 1/10 the American cost. The New York Times had a big report on this, that how come they are able to operate at these costs and we can't do it. And Russians have made this big comeback in Syria with their weapon systems. So I don't hear very many people here now talk about bad service, bad quality, it's proved itself. But apart from that, the relationship is very, very good. We've absorbed a lot of technology, whereas you find it difficult with the others. We've got the Mirage 2000. We don't know anything about it. We only know how to fly it. The Jaguars we assembled in Bangalore, so we have some knowledge there. But no upgradation after that, because that engine is now an old engine, the Adore engine. It's a very old engine. We haven't learned anything new after that, and we haven't modernized. Whereas, we made the complete mix series from 21 to 29, and then the SUS. So it's a huge learning curve.
But let me play devil's advocate here, Mohan. Has there been a reluctance on the part of Moscow over the years to actually empower Indian manufacturing? Is the constraint here or the reluctance there?
I think Moscow has always been generous on transference of equipment, except that the costs have changed. The Russians didn't do conventional costing till the collapse of the Soviet Union.
So has been...
So suddenly we say, oh, you charged 10 lakhs last year, and now you're charging
Well, we saw that in a big way in the Vikramaditya, in the aircraft carrier. But let me come to you, Satish, since you are the sailor here. And if I remember right, you commissioned the first Talwar, right?
Yeah.
So now, in the IGA, the focus on the 4 Talwars, what will it do to make in India? And also, since Chakra's commissioning has been announced, how would you characterize the naval component of the India-Russia military relationship?
You see, we've enjoyed a very robust relationship with Russia, as Ambassador Ajai Malhotra brought out. And for the last 40 years, we've always got state-of-the-art equipment and weapon systems from them without fail. For the last few years, the quantum has not been as much. So this, I think, intergovernmental agreement is a win-win situation for all of us. It is good for the Russian industry because they get a boost. They are experiencing an economic slowdown. It is good for our Make in India program. It is exceptionally good for our defense services because our programs were also not doing as well. And whilst the Russians have been helping us in Make in India programs earlier also, we never made helicopters that we acquired from them for whatever reason. So this is a first in this case. Insofar as these ships are concerned, I think we've just been lucky that we've got this offer, because they first built the Talwar class for us, 3 of them. They were new ships with state-of-the-art systems. Then they followed up with 3 more, which were much better in terms of hull and the equipment and the infusion of Indian-made armament on board. And so much so, they were so impressed that they started making these ships for themselves, and under the Grigorevich, they called, and 3 have been commissioned. And these were 3 extra hulls which were being made in the Yantar shipyard in Kaliningrad. And unfortunately, because of their deteriorating relationship with Ukraine,
so the engines become a problem.
They were not getting the gas turbines. Yeah. And we enjoy a good relationship, and Ukraine doesn't mind giving these gas turbines to us. So therefore, this deal has come through. And so 2 we get and 2 we make. At a cost of about 6,700 crores, I think these ships are pretty cheap.
So it's worth the investment.
And what is, I think, most important is that the 2 that we make would be made in a shipyard. The shipyard has not been disclosed as yet, but I hope it's a private shipyard. But that would be the first time that a private shipyard would make a weapon-intensive ship. Right now, it's only the MDL and the GRSC who are making
the public sector yards.
And out of this 4 billion that is going to be paid, it will include the various facilities that would have to be set up in the shipyard. So you can expect that, you know, a shipyard would be able to start building frigates of the Talwar class, like we have the Project 17.
And it will help the whole
Alpha.
Indian ecosystem, as it were.
It will be.
But Ajay, can I request you perhaps to share some of your thoughts, because you had a long innings in Moscow and many major military deals were successfully completed on your watch. Vikramaditya, for instance, was when you were there, right?
Sure.
What are the lessons learnt, as it were, because we talk about our engagement with India, Soviet Union. Then post-Cold War, we have India, Russia. Now in phase 3, which is India with Russia under a renewed Mr. Putin, if I may say so, in terms of how he's asserting himself. What are the lessons that the policymakers might like to internalize?
Well, if you look at the contracts that had come through at that stage, and here I want to first of all point out one thing, that Russia is probably the only country which has important sensitive technologies which we need, which is very willing to share it with us. I'm commenting on this because you had referred to that in the past.
Well, if you remember in 1988, when the Cold War was still on, they gave us a nuclear-powered submarine on lease.
Yeah.
It was 88,
the first Chakra. The first Chakra. And they've now given us a second Chakra. And as has been acknowledged publicly, and so I'm not revealing a secret, even the Arihant program has benefited from Russian support.
Absolutely.
Both in terms of the propulsion source and in terms of the design, etc. So we have benefited from that, and we continue to benefit from our cooperation with Russia in many very significant ways. If you look at, and here I would agree with what Mohan had mentioned, if you look at the costing angle, the Russians have never been very clear how to do it. Earlier, the approval used to be, if you were in charge of a design bureau or a manufacturing plant, you were just told, make these things, that is what is required by the state. You got a huge amount of money to do it, and your only expectation was that you delivered it on time. How much it cost was irrelevant. Now it is different. Now they have to look at costing, etc. And that's why you find very often there are cost overruns, because they really didn't understand how to do the costing on it. You also find that there might be delays in production that might be there. There might be some instances where spares are not delivered on time. Again, because let's not forget, Russia is a very secretive society and has been so, not only now or in the Soviet period, even in the Tsarist period and before. Traditionally, so even if you have the approvals for getting a particular sort of defense equipment from them, all the clearances, you still need, when you have to get the spares, you still need the same sort of clearances once again. We clear that very nicely in the context of the Navy, the Indian Navy. And I think that is a good model to be followed by our policymakers now.
I hope the policymakers are listening to Ajay.
I'm sure they know about it. I'm not revealing anything fantastically secretive. But the point is that once you place an order for a ship, you got the approvals for everything linked with it, all the spares, etc. It was all catalogued and cleared at one go. And thereafter, you didn't need any further approvals for getting the spares, etc. Otherwise, that's where the problem was.
Well, I think this time around the private sector, Mohan, I want you to come in on this. Like Satish said, we hope that the Make in India focus, whether it's the helicopter or the ships, would also involve the Indian private sector. So the question that comes to mind is, what should the Indian private sector now be looking at in terms of the opportunities that Moscow represents in the military domain?
I think as far as the Kama was concerned, that's going to hell. The Russians have showed a preference for hell, and they rejected the private company put forward by the government. So they said, no, we want to go with hell. So that's very clear. Now, the two ships which Admiral is talking about could go to private yards. And, because Mazgaon is one book, because, the Scorpion program and the other submarine program. And there's Garden Reach or, Goa or private shipyards. Private shipyards probably, Larsen & Toubro is ready with the yard, and Pipapa has got a huge
yard in Gujarat, yeah.
And so, they need to use that capacity. Otherwise, that's still a national loss. That's a good thing that, technology is being spread around a bit. Work is also being spread around. And there's something which public sectors will learn from private sector here on costs and efficiencies and similar. I think it's a good thing. And overall, this relationship, purely as an economist, with Russia has been very good. We get far better value for money. We get far better capacity absorption in terms of technology. Now look at what's happening on this US to Japanese plane. They say, you can get the plane, but the weapons suit you'll have to get from somebody else. With Russia, the advantage is that you're dealing at one point. Rosoboron is almost the government. And you're dealing at one point, and everything is settled at one point. You don't have to go to the yard separately and to the wire maker separately. It's all done. So it's a good, like the old days. You decided at the top that this is what we're going to have. And one thing which I noticed that, Prime Minister got a smile off Putin yesterday when he said, an old friend is better than two new ones.
Is there a subtext there about the old friend and two new friends?
I think so. Whether he was smiling, whether Putin was smiling at Prime Minister's Gujarati inflected Russian, but he got a big smile off him. So this is, I think, a good sign for this relation. We went into a limbo in between, and there was a lot of.
I think that's the point. Do you see then that this particular visit of Mr. Putin to Goa and the commitment made by both sides represents a new phase? Because there was a certain period when it seemed that the relationship was in some kind of stasis.
Well, I think what happened was that during MRCA time, we had senior Air Force officers shooting off, saying that, MiG not good, and 29 got black plumes coming out of the back, and I remember I went to an air show where the Russian guy there was particularly made it a point to show an ex-Air Chief Marshal, see the MiG-29 flying, there's no plume on it, So,
but Satish, on the naval side, like Mohan seems to suggest that for the helicopters, Russia has already indicated a preference for HAL, which is the public sector in India. But we know from our experience in the Navy in terms of shipbuilding that cost and time overruns in our public yards have been a very serious constraint. So when we talk about this very ambitious Make in India, particularly like Mohan talked about the private yards, what is the way ahead?
You see, we have quite frankly not had a very good experience in dealing with the private shipyards. But that done, you got to make a beginning. We had ABG making a training ship for us. We had the PIPA making offshore patrol vessels for us. And there were time and cost overruns. But the point is that you got to make a beginning. And here is an opportunity, with these two ships coming in, that there is going to be the Russian expertise, which is going to inflow into our shipyards. And if that shipyard is a private shipyard, then, there is an advantage there. Because otherwise, shipyards, and mind you, when we nurtured MDL and we nurtured GRSE, we put in a lot of investment. We put in a lot of money. So we've come to the same stage insofar as the private shipyard is concerned. But I would like to bring out another thing, and that is with regard to the acquisition processes. The government-to-government deal under this IGA, it would be preferred by the services over the other DPP procedures, because here is an opportunity. In the past, we have had very bad experiences with the Augusta Westland, one deal getting into a problem, the company being blacklisted, other programs suffering. So here, with an oversight by the government and a government-to-government deal, that is behind us. And I think that is, the services would definitely benefit by a state-of-the-art AD system, by very cost-effective frigates, and by helicopters which are going to be made in India.
So I think perhaps with Russia, particularly as we have seen in the case with the United States, the government to government seems to be a faster, because we've also had the corruption issues that India's defense procurement has been scarred by over the years. A quick last word from you, Ajay. What about the China factor? Where do you see Russia-China going?
Russia-China is an important relationship for Russia, including in the defense field. And again, we should not get that wrong. But equally, Russia fully appreciates the fact that in different circumstances, China could well emerge again as an adversary to it. It has concerns about Chinese possible immigration into
Siberia,
Russian Siberia and the Russian Far East. It is concerned about its import-export pattern, where it is exporting raw materials and importing Chinese goods like much of the world.
But these concerns are not there in relation to India. I'll have to request you to hold that thought, and maybe we'll have to bring all of you again for another session in the interest of time. But about the India-Russia relationship, as Prime Minister Modi noted at Goa, Russia is a valued old friend. And this is a relationship that both Delhi and Moscow are keen to nurture and strengthen in the years ahead. The global strategic and security environment is in a state of flux, and the contours of a multipolar global order disorder are discernible. In this evolving matrix, both India and Russia are seeking to review and recalibrate their relationship with the two major powers, that is the United States and China. India's aspirations to retain a credible degree of strategic autonomy will be shaped by its military capability, and the quality of this autonomy will in turn be determined by the arms import dependency index, which currently, alas, is very high for India. Therefore, Delhi needs to acquire the appropriate indigenous defense manufacturing and related R&D policies in an accelerated manner. The success of INS Arihant, India's first indigenously designed and built nuclear submarine, is case in point, where, as we noted in our discussion, Moscow's help was invaluable. And hopefully, the agreements inked in Goa by Prime Minister Modi and President Putin will be realized in a manner that will further empower this important relationship between old friends. On that note, allow me to thank my guests, Ambassador Malhotra, Mr. Guruswamy, Admiral Soni.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Security Scan. Goodbye.